Hello and welcome to this talk designed for litigants in person about how to present your case before judges. My name's Declan O'Dempsey. I'm a barrister at Cloisters Chambers. I want to talk about certain types of very formal structures for arguments. They're called deductive reasoning, where you deduce your conclusions from your premises. Take, for example, the argument that if the defendant is sick and cannot attend court, there has to be an adjournment. The defendant is sick and cannot attend court. Therefore, and this is the conclusion, there must be an adjournment. So that has the form if proposition A, then proposition B. Proposition A is true, so therefore proposition B must be true. Let's have a look at another formal argument. If A, then B, but B is false, therefore A is false. So, if the defendant has spent money on legal representation, the defendant will have invoices from a lawyer. But the defendant doesn't have invoices from a lawyer. Conclusion: the defendant has not spent money on legal representation. There are several other versions of this formal legal structure, or deductive reasoning structure. Here's another one. If A, then B, and if B, then C, therefore if A, then C. Let's see how that works with a worked example. If you have a lot of friends from different racial groups, you realise that you should not judge people by the racial group to which they belong. If you realise that you should not judge people by their racial group, you're likely to be more tolerant of racial differences. So if you have a lot of friends from different racial groups, you're likely to be more tolerant of racial differences. Now that's just an example to show the form of reasoning. Let's have a look at another form. Suppose you assert that either A is true or B is true, and you can show that A is false. Then you would conclude that B is true. Let's think about that for a second. The defendant's behaviour is explained either by stupidity or malice, but the defendant is not stupid, so the defendant's behaviour is explained by malice. Here's a more complicated version of the same thing. A or B. If A, then C. If B, then D. So either C or D. The manager either hates me or is stupid. If the manager hates me, he would say nasty things about me. If the manager is stupid, he would make lots of errors in relation to everyone. So either the manager would say nasty things about me, or he would make lots of errors in relation to everyone. Another form of argument which is often employed in court cases is the argument based on absurd consequences. It's sometimes referred to as reducing to the absurd. Suppose I want to prove proposition A. I invite the court to assume that A is false. If A is false, then proposition B would follow. But B must be false because it is absurd. Therefore, proposition A must be true after all. Now, This proves that the contrary to what we want to prove leads to either moral, logical, or practical absurdity. Let's take an example. Suppose the worker did overtime. Assume that, and we want to prove that in fact the worker didn't do overtime. So assume that they did. If the worker worked overtime, then like any worker, the worker would record the time worked, because that's the only way that the worker will get paid for it. However, the worker didn't record the time worked. It's absurd that the worker works but doesn't claim overtime payments for it. Therefore, it's likely that the worker did not work overtime.